Hello and welcome to Musical Musings, a place where musicians at St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood muse about music. Today's musician is Anthony Ray, a versatile professional musician and tenor section leader in the St. Thomas Choir. So today we are welcoming Anthony Ray, the one and only Anthony Ray, who is our tenor section leader in the St. Thomas Choir. Thank you for being with us today, Anthony.
Sure thing. My pleasure to be here.
So how long have you been a parishioner at St. Thomas, or what's your relationship with St. Thomas, I should say?
I guess officially it goes back to 2017, but actually I was familiar with St. Thomas before that even. Back in high school, some of us went to the beach, and on the way home, I remember we took Hollywood Boulevard to go back home, and we passed by this really beautiful church in this neighborhood, and I just remember seeing it and thinking how beautiful it was. And I was already going to a church here in Lancaster, where I live, Palmdale, Lancaster area, and I knew I'd never be able to go there because I already had my own church and I was involved with everything on Sundays. And little did I know that like 10 years later after that, I would actually be attending St. Thomas. So my first encounter with St. Thomas was just passing by and just admiring its beauty and wishing I could visit sometime. And the first time I ever visited St. Thomas, it was in 2016 for a concert that I performed there. And I remember walking into the church thinking, oh, wow, this is that church that I passed by, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years before. So I did the concert in 2016, and you were actually the first person I met there because you were receiving that concert. And I remember I was looking for the choir room, I had no idea where it was, and passed by you and asked where it was. And you, oh, just go downstairs. So I think it's pretty ironic or coincidental how I found St. Thomas that way, and then you were one of the first people that I met. And then it wasn't until the following year, 2017, that I just decided on a whim. I had a rehearsal down in LA that day, and I thought, well, let me go down early. And I have no idea what it was that kind of drew me to St. Thomas. I hadn't been there since that concert in 2016. I think it was about April or May of 2017 that I actually went back for my first high mass, and then kind of just started going, not very consistently, but maybe once a month or so for probably the next 8 months until you offered me position as a tenor section leader in January of 2018. And then January 2018 is when I was there every week. That's when I considered it my church.
Great. So wow, I didn't realize you've been singing in the choir for over 2 years now.
Yeah, actually, when you saw me at Mass that first time, you were surprised. I remember you saying, hey, I saw you go up for communion, and you were pretty surprised about that. And you told me that a tenor was out for a while because of back injury, and asked if I would be willing to sub. So I kind of subbed that summer, and then that fall, I had just moved down to LA for school and was trying to figure out where I wanted to go to church, and was trying to find a choir to sing with, a choir position. And I ended up doing a lot of subbing in 2017, and then it wasn't until 2018 when I was able to be in there full time.
Wow, time flies. Gosh, it feels like it was yesterday. It's crazy. So you joined the choir as the section leader, and you are a musician professionally. So what do you do now as a professional musician besides singing at St. Thomas?
Well, now I do nothing.
Right.
But in regular time, in regular season, I sing with LA Master Chorale. I do a lot of subbing for different services throughout the diocese for other parishes. So for like special masses or even songs, things like that. I will do a lot of gigging around with other choirs that might need a little bit of filling in. I sing with another group called Synthesis, which is a Seattle-based choir, but they perform throughout the U.S., primarily back east and then here on the West Coast. And some recording gigs too and things like that, the typical LA musician type of life. But the big thing that I have the two big things that I have are St. Thomas and LA Master Chorale. which the chorale, when, before all this was happening, was keeping me busy pretty much year round. It was just nonstop.
It's great. It sounds very, very diverse.
Yeah, it's kind of the cool thing about it is that in LA there is so much diversity in music, and I will say that we're a little bit heavy on the contemporary music side, not so much on the early music side, which I prefer. But it's so cool being able to premiere pieces by composers like Muley, Tandon, even composers here in LA, Sean Kirchner, and plenty of others. So it's a really wonderful experience to be able to sing with the chorale and to get to perform with the LA Phil quite frequently throughout the year. We do a lot of major choral works, like one of my favorite pieces we've ever done with the Phil and the chorale was Bernstein Mass, which was about 2 years ago, which is just a huge production. The last thing I actually performed before COVID hit was Hindemith's Murder, the Hope of Women, which is kind of a wild piece, and then Kurt Weill's Berliner Requiem, which were both staged. Essa Pekka was conducting, and LA Phil. Was pretty amazing. And little did we know at the time that was going to be our last major performance before all this hit.
Well, in terms of the early music kind of community here, you're right, it is small, but that means that there's potential for growth. So somebody like you could possibly help build that.
Yeah, I've been trying to kind of foster a little bit more of that in small ways. Usually I'll get some friends together and we'll go to I'm kind of known for going to the Disney Concert Hall parking garage and just recording music down there, because the acoustics are so lively and it's so wonderful for early music. But we're informally known as Codex LA. And it's just kind of whenever I can get some people together and we can record some stuff. But I'm hoping when things resume to somewhat normal at some point to be able to get some people together and do some performances down there.
Well, you also did that performance in the where is that? The train station in downtown Union Station?
Yeah, Union Station. Yeah, last year we did the Bach in the subway, and we ended up doing, you were in there, we did one of the cantatas and we did 2 of the motets, which was a lot of fun. It was such a fun experience to be able to help put that together.
That was really fun. It's like Bach, in public.
Yeah.
Which is great. It was really cool. So for those of you who are perceptive out there, you may notice that Anthony right now has a wire coming out of his ear, and that didn't just magically happen. Editing makes it possible that we could take the time to get the thing going, because we were having some feedback, but that's been fixed. And now we're going to talk about your musical background. So you're obviously a diverse musician who's able to do many things, and you haven't spoken about really everything you can do quite yet. So what is your background that's enabled you to become the musician you are today?
Yeah, so I always kind of tell this story when people ask me about my musical background, that it kind of started with something kind of actually very sad. My great-grandfather had passed away when I was 12, and we went back for his funeral in Arizona, which is down by the border in Nogales is where the funeral was. And that's kind of what introduced me to, because growing up, I grew up at Evangelical Baptist. And so that was my first time ever attending Mass, was for his funeral Mass. And that was the first time I really had been exposed to a lot of things that directly influenced my life now. One of those being that my great-grandfather was a musician also. He had a big band in Mexico, played clarinet and saxophone. And I remember seeing his instruments on display and thinking how cool that was. So that was in January of 2003. And in July, for my birthday, my grandparents bought me a clarinet. So I started playing clarinet when I was 12. It took about 4 years of lessons. And then at 16, I picked up the oboe. I never took lessons on the oboe. I really wish I would have, but I got decent enough, just kind of taking what I knew with the clarinet and also reading a lot and, studying as much as I could without a teacher, and was able to do pretty well on the clarinet here in Palmdale, Lancaster. And then at 17, I started taking organ lessons with the local church organist. And that was kind of a weird situation, or funny situation too, where I had known this older woman who would tell me about her church which is a local United Methodist church up here. And she would always tell me, yeah, we have this huge organ and it's really beautiful. And she would tell me all about it. And then finally one day I actually called the church and asked, does the organist give lessons? So the secretary at the time put me in touch with Mary Zimmerman, who was my organ teacher for probably about 6 years or so. And it was a really wonderful relationship. And I still keep in touch with her. She's a really wonderful person. And she influenced me a lot as far as my instrumental abilities go. And even, I would say, it informed my singing as well. I remember when she taught me to play hymns, breathe with the hymns as you're playing. So it really did affect me a lot. And then through her, she pushed me to join the Antelope Valley Master Chorale, which was the first time I'd ever sang in any choir, which was in, this was, I guess, in 2013 or 2012, I'm sorry. That was the first time I ever sang in a choir, was about 8 years ago. Before that was all instrumental, all orchestral, played in orchestras and things like that, and in bands. And I thought, well, if I'm going to join a choir, maybe I should get a voice teacher. So everyone had recommended Alyssa Odenthal to me, who was my voice teacher for about 5 or 6 years. And I give her so much credit for where I'm at right now as far as my singing, because she gave me such a solid foundation for my musicality. So I always credit Mrs. Zimmerman and Mrs. Odenthal, and then another choir director up here, Mike McCullough. He really kind of took everything I was learning and just really molded it and helped me to find a very refined choral voice. So it's a really long and kind of convoluted background, but I really feel like it set me up for a really good position as a musician here in LA. I had the instrumental foundation, which allowed me to know music, not just to be able to sing, but to actually know music, know the theory behind what I was singing, to really develop an ear for intonation, because when you're playing oboe and clarinet, you have to be spot on with intonation. And just learning musicality in general. And I feel like that all really set me up for where I'm at right now.
Great. So the pieces we've done at St. Thomas, we've done quite a bit of repertoire, as you've mentioned. What are some of your favorites, if you have any?
I love a lot of what we've done. Each piece is so unique that we do at St. Thomas, and the spectrum of piece that we do is so broad, which is really wonderful, because a lot of times churches might fall into just kind of one category. But we do a lot within the traditional choral spectrum. And one of the pieces that really sticks out to me is the dark Mass in F, which we did last year for Easter, and was also the same Mass setting that we did for my confirmation at Easter Vigil. So it kind of holds a special place in my heart. There's, I think on our the parish website or the Facebook page, there is a recording of the Sanctus and Benedictus, and it's just, I go back and listen to that occasionally. It brings back a lot of good memories. So that's definitely one of the big ones. And then anything we do as section leaders, polyphony-wise, so if we do Palestrina or Victoria or Morales or any other Renaissance composer, I always love that, because it's a chance to, first of all, we have very little time to practice it compared to some of the other larger pieces we're doing with the full choir. So to have that pressure of, okay, we've got to learn this maybe in 1 or 2 rehearsals and then do it. There's a bit of adrenaline. There's a bit of an adrenaline rush that happens with such short amount of time, but knowing that the singers are so good, the other section leaders are so good, we can rely on each other and know that we're gonna make it through, and there might be one little bump here or there, and I feel like I'm usually the one who hits the bump. But it's always so much fun, and it's such a tight, very clean sound that we have, and it's such a pleasure to sing with the other section leaders at St. Thomas.
Yeah, you guys are just a fabulous bunch. We're really lucky to have you guys. I love the balance between kind of that bright, brilliant sound that carries in the space, but then the beautiful flexibility and supple quality to all your voices.
Yeah,
Really,
yeah, definitely.
it's hard to find, I have to say, to find singers with your qualities. So that's why I try to keep you guys as long as I can. You guys are amazing. And by the way, nice people,
Oh
which to me
yeah,
matters
everyone.
equally,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, April and Bradley and Matt, it's just so wonderful getting to sing with them, and the personalities are so wonderful, and the artistry behind the personalities is equal to that.
Yeah, I agree with that. So what's it been like, because you've been cantering a lot for us for our digital masses. What's that been like for you?
It's been very interesting. For those who have been watching Mass, they'll see that right here is where I usually do most of that. And a little bit I'll record for Evensong and Benediction. It's interesting because, as you can see, I have my bed right here, which is very nice and soft, and a blanket, and there's carpet down here, and then books over there, and it's a very dry room, and so it's hard for me to, when I'm singing at the church, I'm listening for the acoustics, and I'm listening to be able to sing into those acoustics. And here there are no acoustics, so I can't really sing into anything. So I have to manipulate my voice in certain ways to make it sound maybe a little bit more brilliant. Usually it's a lack of brilliance singing in here. So I have to try and find that brilliance to make it come across as not sounding flat. Because when that brilliance is gone, it tends to sound flat, and I don't want to sound flat. But it's a very different experience. I think it's an experience that will inform me when we're out of the season. It's taught me a lot. It's taught me a lot about singing by myself, about my own voice. So it's been a very interesting time. It's not always been easy, for sure. I miss singing in acoustics, and I've had the opportunity maybe 2 or 3 times in the past almost 4 months now to be able to go to the concert hall, sneak in. I have actually snuck into the concert hall, the parking structure, not to the actual concert hall, but I snuck down into the parking structure once at like 10 p.m. and it felt so good to sing in the acoustics. But yeah, that's the big thing, is just learning how to manipulate my voice, honestly, to bring out the brilliance in a very dead space.
Well, yeah, it's a challenge, but it seems like you found the silver lining in it, which is
I'm trying.
that's good.
Really
It's hard to
trying.
do. It's hard to do right now, but that's good that you're doing it. Um, so last thing, is there anything you'd like to say to our friends at St. Thomas while we're all kind of away from each other?
Yeah, I miss everyone a lot. And I know this is a very difficult time for a lot of people. And I think our levels of difficulties certainly vary from person to person, depending on our circumstances of, who we have with us and who we don't have with us, what resources we may or may not have. And I think the thing we just have to remember is that we will get to the other side of this, inevitably. It may be more drawn out, unfortunately, than we want it to be. But I think if we each have patience, we have the opportunity to really develop our own spirituality. Even though this is a very communal faith. It's a very tangible faith. It's a sacramental faith. There is another side of that coin, which is a very personal faith and a very solitary faith that we tend to forget sometimes, whether it be through our own spiritual devotions of morning, evening prayer, Compline, or any of the other offices throughout the day, or the rosary, or other personal forms of devotion. And I think right now is a really good opportunity to be able to take the time to deepen our faith on a very deeply personal level. And I've been trying to do that for myself. So that when we do come back to a more communal form of worshiping, we will have I believe we'll have a very different outlook when we move forward, and we'll have a much deeper appreciation for the sacraments, for the Mass, for one another, and for what we had before all this happened.
Thank you for watching. Please be sure to follow us on social media for upcoming content. Until next time, God bless and take care.